Friends, this is a crazy news day, so stay tuned. Benjamin Netanyahu is about to be indicted today, and this is on the heels of him reaching out to a racist party to save his political coalition. Great Britain threatens its citizens that fight in the IDF of losing their citizenship. And lastly, Islamic Jihad threatens Tel Aviv, my city. Hi everyone, I'm Ron Canner and this is Your Israel Connection. Your Israel Connection is brought to you by Tikkun Global, a worldwide Messianic Jewish family of ministers, ministries, and congregations dedicated to the restoration of Israel and the church, and by Messiah's Mandate, raising up leaders for the coming Israeli revival. Okay, let's get to the news. So last week, Benjamin Netanyahu did something that really upset most of the country. Now, in order to understand what he did, you have to understand Israeli politics. You might get the most votes, or rather more votes than any other party in the Knesset elections. Let's say you get 25%, 30 seats. You then have to build a coalition with other parties to get over 60 to actually have a government. Okay. So Netanyahu was very concerned that one of his coalition partners, the Jewish Home Party, was not going to meet the 3.25% threshold to actually get seats in the Knesset. In other words, you might have a party and you might think you're all that, but if you don't get 3.25% or higher of the vote, you don't get any seats at all. And at that point, it looked like Jewish Home was going to fall below that, and he would lose probably 2, maybe 3 Knesset seats. So what he did is he brokered a deal with a party called Otzma, which is a racist party. Again, they represent a tiny, tiny minority of Israelis who are racist. Every country has racists. We have racists too. They don't like Arabs. They were founded by a guy by the name of Meir Kahane, who was gunned down by an American Arab in 1990, and he was a racist. And his actual organization has been outlawed because of the racist view, but the political party never hits the 3.25%. So nobody ever had to worry about them actually being in the government. Until last week, our prime minister brokered a deal amongst the two groups that would cause them to join and become one, and then probably get above the 3.25% together. That would ensure that Bibi Netanyahu would have at least 2, maybe 3 more coalition partners or more seats in the Knesset to be part of this coalition. And in order to get the Jewish Home Party to hold their nose and make an agreement with the Otzma Party, who are racist, and everybody knows they're racist, he said, I'm going to give you 2 cabinet seats in my government if I'm elected. This has not gone over well with the Israeli public. First of all, his opponents, as you would expect, seized upon it and began to call him a racist. Now, I want to be clear, I do not believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is a racist. He has spent the better part of this past year forming incredible coalitions with Arab governments like Oman, or rather Muslim majority governments, like Oman, like Chad. And then he has even recently met in Poland with the leaders of Arab nations in order to form a front against Iran. Netanyahu is not a racist, but this is not a good look. It is never a good look when you wink at those who are racist. And for many Israelis, this is a bridge too far, very difficult to swallow. What do some well-known Israelis have to say about this? Well, Zionist Rabbi Benny Lau, he assailed the move, likening it's easy for me to say, the movement of Kahane, the racist rabbi who started the movement, to Nazism. He said, quote, the defilement and destruction of the land serves as a guarantee for the loss of the land, meaning that when we don't live a certain way, a righteous way, then we can expect to lose our country. God is not going to bless us. Also, Yossi Klein Halevi, a senior fellow at the Shalom Institute, said that bringing this extremist party into the mainstream Israeli politics is a desecration of God's name, of Israel's reputation. It doesn't look good around the world to other nations to see our prime minister embrace an openly racist political group, no matter how tiny and insignificant they may be. He went on to say, we're in for a major moment of self-reckoning, more and more Israelis are going to realize what that means, meaning embracing this group. There's nothing good that can come from it. And if it means losing your political career, you lose your political career. Okay, this is really breaking news here in Israel. Just today, it was announced, or rather last night, that today our Attorney General, Avichai Mandelblit, in fact, you can see posters all over the country on bridges over highways that are telling Mandelblit, the people deserve the right to know. To know what? To know whether or not he is going to indict Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of bribery. And any minute now, he is expected to actually carry that out, where he is going to recommend that our Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the most recognizable names in all the earth, for good or for bad, is going to be indicted today on charges of bribery. What does this mean? It means that our elections, which are April 9th, less than 2 months, about 1 month away, we're going to have elections. And the leader of the ruling party is about to be indicted for bribery. This is huge. You see, right now, if elections were today and there was no indictment, then Bibi's group would get, the Likud, they would get 29 to 30 seats out of the 120. And his main competition, which is the uniting of two parties that they've become the Kachol Lavan, which doesn't sound great in English, the blue-white party, but in Hebrew, when you say Kachol Lavan, it's like saying red, white, and blue if you're American. It means something to Israelis. And the Kachol Lavan group, they are projected to get 36 seats. But even though they're getting more than Likud, they would probably not be able to build a coalition. Therefore, it would go to Bibi to build his own coalition that would look very much like the former coalition. They would just have a fresh mandate to govern. But if he is indicted, and he's going to be today, they would project, polls are saying that the blue and white party will get 44 seats. That is a huge number in the Knesset. You know, let me just put it this way. Right now, the largest party, Likud, has 30 seats. This party would have 44 seats, and they would absolutely be chosen to form the next government. And Likud would fall from 29 down to 25. So this is a big deal. We'll keep you posted, and you can go to sites like JerusalemPost.com, TimesOfIsrael.com. This is a big deal, something you need to pray about. But it is interesting that this massive thing happens just a week after he made what I feel was a very horrible miscalculation in reaching out to this racist party. We will keep you informed. Hey friends, I'm so glad that you tuned in to this. I want to ask you to do me a favor. Could you like this broadcast, share this broadcast? If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on iTunes, leave a 5-star review. That would be awesome. But I also want to encourage you to get my free book. It's called The Coming End Time Awakening. All you got to do is go to tikkun.tv, tikkun.tv. Sign up for our newsletter, and I'm going to send you my book free of charge. I think it's going to be a real blessing to you. Thank you so much. Speaking of Israeli elections, 2 days after our elections, the Trump administration is going to release the deal of the century, maybe the millennium, maybe the deal of time immemorial. I don't know, but it's going to be the deal for the Israelis and the Palestinians, and Donald Trump presents himself as a deal maker. But I have to say, many Israelis are a little skeptical about this deal because they say that they're going to deal with literally every outstanding issue. And Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the United States president, gave an interview recently to Sky News Arabia where he gave a little hint about what's going to happen. And the thing that has us concerned here in Israel is that they might want to divide Jerusalem. The Bible speaks very clearly about those who would divide God's land, and it's not good what it says. You can see it in Joel 3. The Lord is very upset at those who divide the land of Israel. One of the things that he wants to do is, and this would be good for the Palestinian people, is to combine their governments. Because right now what you have in 2006, Hamas they won the election. They got the people down there. See, here's the problem you have for the Palestinians, and this is where my heart goes out for them. They have to choose. They haven't had elections. I don't think they've had elections in over 10 years. But in 2006, they had to choose down in Gaza between Hamas, a terrorist organization that was raising money and building schools and hospitals and feeding people, and then they had to choose against the non-Islamic jihadist terrorist Palestinian Authority, who is completely corrupt. Did you know that Yasser Arafat died? Well, you probably knew that. But did you know that he died with $1 billion in his bank account? Now, where did he get that $1 billion from? It wasn't from any type of business that he owned. It was from me, and it was from you. It was from aid from the UN, from the U.S., from all over that he stuck in his pocket. So therefore, they voted for Hamas, and it's been horrible for the people of Gaza. So the problem first is you got two governments, one in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority, the corrupt Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And they don't like each other. Every time we try and bring them together, well, not we, but Egypt or some other country tries to bring them together for love and harmony and peace, it blows up. If they could ever unite on the one thing that they all agree on is that they hate us, maybe they could get something done. But they hate each other so much. And then, of course, the Arab nations themselves tend to hate the Palestinians. That's a well-kept secret. Tremendous racism in the other Arab nations against Palestinians. And so one of the things he wants to do is to see this become one government. He also wants there to be freedom of religion. Jared, what are you talking about? I assume you're talking about in the Palestinian governed territories, because in Israel, unlike what Representative Ilhan Omar said a few weeks ago when she said that Muslims and Christians don't have freedom. Listen, I am a Messianic Jew, and while it's not very popular here in Israel, I have freedom. I can go to the window right now and shout, Yeshua is Lord, and nothing's going to happen to me. Last night in our Nest Cafe gathering, we had two Orthodox Jews that came here to protest. You know why? Because they also have freedom. But they can't hurt us. They can't arrest us. There is freedom in democratic Israel. And the freest Muslims in the world, or rather in the Middle East, they don't live in Syria. They don't live in Saudi Arabia. They do not live in Kuwait. They live right here in Israel, where they vote and they're free. Now, is there tensions? Absolutely. It's not easy every day. It's not in any country. But I'm telling you that a Muslim today can walk out of his house and scream that Benjamin Netanyahu is a this and a that, and not good things, by the way, and nothing's going to happen to him. Try doing that in Saudi Arabia against the crown prince, or in Syria against Assad. You're not going to live very long after that. So freedom of religion is a thing already in Israel, but in the Palestinian territories, not so much. Obviously, they don't think very much of Judaism, and Christians there are persecuted. So we're waiting until a couple days after the election so that we can find out exactly what is in the Trump peace plan. Again, up until now, nobody's been able to solve this issue. I don't know that it's going to be solved before the Lord comes back. But the Bible says that anyone who tries to move Jerusalem is going to be injured, Zechariah chapter 12. So be careful. Okay, so there's a website that is reporting that a fellow by the name of John McDonnell, who is a politician in Great Britain, he wanted in 2014, he wrote a blog, it's been up for 3 years, and he wanted to pass a law that would say Brits that served in the IDF would lose their citizenship in Britain, because a lot of Brits have dual citizenship. I have dual citizenship. I'm an American. I'm also Israeli. And you have some, I guess, that from Great Britain that also have the same thing. And part of becoming an Israeli citizen, if you're young enough, is you serve in the IDF. Well, he looks at the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, like ISIS. And he's like, we would never let anybody, well, let's look at his own words. He says, will you be warning any British citizens considering engagement with the IDF? That's exactly how he speaks. That is like a perfect accent of John McDonnell. And he goes on to say that such engagement may put their British citizenship in jeopardy. Sounds a little bit like South African. I'm not sure. Anyways, let's go on in his normal voice. Given the seriousness of the current situation in Gaza and the apparent escalation of the Israeli attacks on Palestinians, fails to mention that we're dealing with terrorists here, I urge you to address these questions promptly so that any British citizen currently participating or planning to participate in these attacks is warned of the potential consequences and thus be deterred from acting in this way. Now, the letter has since been deleted, and then somebody came to his defense, one of the other British politicians, and he said, this was the height of the... See, he speaks like that too. All right, I'll do a normal voice. This was at the height of the barbaric bombing and attacks on Gaza, when hundreds of Palestinian men, women, and children were being killed. For those holding joint citizenship, it does not entail making them stateless. Okay, come on. Let's just think for a minute. You mentioned Mr. Unnamed British politician, that this was during a time when Israel was just acting horribly against Gaza. You fail to remember that the reason that Israel was defending itself was because thousands and thousands, did you get that? That's one and then 3 zeros with an S. Thousands of rockets were sent against our civilian population day after day after day for about 4 weeks before we finally had a ground invasion. That's what we call self-defense. You probably don't remember unnamed British politician, but at this time they were bombing us from UN sites in Gaza, from schools, kindergartens, and hospitals, hoping that Israel would then respond and then accidentally bomb a hospital. They wanted their people to die so they could hold up dead bodies and say, look how horrible Israel is. That's the situation we're in. You don't really have to deal with that there in London, but that is what we have to deal with. And so we deal with it in as much precision as we can so as not to harm innocent people. But when you speak about the deaths in Gaza, keep in mind most of those were terrorists who work for terrorist organizations. There is no Israeli that I've ever met that gets any joy when an innocent Palestinian child or woman is killed, even when we are responding to those attacking us. God forbid. It's horrible. But you know what? We're not just going to sit back and let us get bombed every day. They put their own people in danger. So, to all Brits who are serving in the IDF, hang in there. You don't need to go back there anyways. Just hang out with us. Stay here in Israel. Be a citizen. It's all going to be good. We'll have a falafel together. It's going to be great. And let's continue speaking about Gaza because Islamic Jihad, they have announced that they have created, with the help of Iran, by the way, a rocket that can reach all the way here to Tel Aviv. And they're pretty excited about it. They said, quote, the enemy, that's us, Israel's, the enemy's act of stupidity against the Gaza Strip and its residents will turn the occupied cities and communities into hell, God willing. Well, I got some bad news. I don't think God is willing. And let me just break down that for a minute. You notice he said occupied cities. Now, when you speak about the occupied territories, I thought they were concerned about Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza. He's talking about Tel Aviv. He calls Tel Aviv an occupied city. You understand? Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they don't want just the West Bank or Gaza. They want all of Israel. They want Haifa, Tel Aviv, Beersheba, the Negev desert. They want it all. They want to kill us all. So he goes on to say, quote, the occupation has no place on the land of Palestine. It will either, meaning us, we will either withdraw from it or suffer harmful blows. Well, first of all, friend, there's no such thing as Palestinian territory. you do understand that, right? And you got to study history because there's never been a nation called Palestine. There's never been a governor of Palestine. There's never been a state. There's no Palestinian language or culture apart from Arabic language and culture. It was an invented history that He was a terrorist, but he was a very smart man. Yasser Arafat, in the 60s, took the word Palestine, which really was connected to anyone who lived in this region, Jewish, Christian, Arab, didn't matter where you were from. It was a region that goes back 2,000 years to the Romans that was nicknamed Palestine. It was never connected to an Arab ethnic culture, language, etc. But, kudos to Arafat for getting the whole world to believe that. But in truth, there is no such thing as Palestinian territories. And anyways, so they are threatening us to turn Tel Aviv into hell with their little rockets. They have a few rockets. I don't want to mock because, the haughtiness comes before a fall. But I do know this, that the IDF has enough deterrence to know that they're not really going to do that much in Tel Aviv. And for those of you watching, but Ron, that's scary. How do you live there knowing that their words are very scary? Words. This is the Middle East. In the Middle East, rhetoric is king. Remember Saddam Hussein? He said that if America would attack Iraq, it would become the mother of all wars. Well, if you remember, it was, the little tiny sister kindergarten of all wars, because immediately when America went, this is the first Gulf War, he and his troops, they fled Saudi Arabia, they fled Kuwait, and they all went back into Iraq, and they all surrendered. I remember that. It was not but that's the Middle East. You screw, we're going to do this to you, and then we're going to do that, and we're going to fill the Mediterranean with your blood, and the sand is going to drink your organ. I mean, it's really rough, but it's rhetoric. It's meant to incite, to instill fear, but we in Israel tend to just let the IDF do the talking for us. Now, again, I want to be clear. My concern when I talk about Gaza, when I talk about the leadership there, my concern is the Islamist and the corrupt Palestinian leadership. It's not the average Arab who's living there, who just wants to provide for his wife or his children and have a normal life. When my wife was 7 years old, her dad used to take her into Gaza to shop. Now, if a Jew went into Gaza right now, he wouldn't last 10 minutes. He'd be killed. But back then, there was peace. There was cooperation. And the Arabs were making money on Israelis during that time. It could have continued, but instead the corrupt leadership turned them into terrorists. They voted for Hamas, and now we have war today. It's sad, it's tragic, because I would love to see these people prosper, but they're never going to prosper when they're led by people like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or the corrupt Palestinian leadership. The thing that is really concerning about all this is that Iran helped them create this bomb. Iran continues to meddle in the affairs of others in the Middle East. In Yemen, in Israel, in Saudi Arabia, all over the Middle East. And that's why we reported to you last week that many of the governments, of Arab governments of the Middle East, are much more concerned about Iran than they ever were about Israel. All right, friends, that is it. Today was a mouthful, a lot happening in Israel. Please pray for us. Pray that we will get the right prime minister in the next elections, that God will continue to bless and protect this country. And we bless you from Israel in the name of Yeshua. Bye-bye.